It started with a single name whispered on obscure forums and classified documents, Solar Warden, a name that shouldn't exist. In the early 2000s, a British hacker named Gary McKinnon broke into 97 computers belonging to NASA and the U.S. Department of Defense. He wasn't looking to sabotage anything. He was searching for the truth, and what he found shocked the world. According to McKinnon, hidden deep in restricted files were logs of a fleet of spacecraft not listed anywhere in public NASA records. Ships with names, crew rosters labeled non-terrestrial officers, a command structure that suggested operations far beyond Earth. This was not science fiction. This was Solar Warden, a covert fleet said to have been launched in the 1950s, not to explore space, but to patrol it, to protect Earth from outside threats, to engage with or repel beings not of this world. McKinnon claimed Solar Warden consisted of 48 advanced vessels, capable of deep space travel, armed with weapons far beyond anything we've seen. And here's where it gets even stranger. Sources alleged that these ships were not built by humans alone. Designs were passed down, they say, through telepathic communication with alien races. Some whispered that the architects of this program were not only extraterrestrial, but tied to former Nazi scientists relocated under Operation Paperclip. The same minds that built Hitler's V-2 rockets, now crafting ships to defend Earth in silence. NASA never confirmed the program, but they never denied it convincingly either. Gary McKinnon became the world's most wanted hacker, facing extradition and decades in prison. But in 2012, after years of legal battles, the case was suddenly dropped. No trial, no courtroom, no testimony, just silence. Was it because he posed a threat to national security, or because he had seen something the world wasn't ready to believe? Even now, Solar Warden remains one of the most chilling and persistent space conspiracies of our time. If it's real, who commands it? What threats have they encountered? And why has the public been kept in the dark? Or was it all just an elaborate hoax designed to mask an even deeper truth? Because in space, the absence of proof doesn't mean the absence of danger. We often imagine astronauts as the pinnacle of human resilience, trained, disciplined, fearless. But what if even they can break? In the silence of space, where Earth is just a blue marble in the distance, the human mind can unravel. NASA knows this. That's why, buried deep in their internal procedures, is a chilling protocol few have ever heard of. The astronaut madness procedure. It's not a myth, it's real, and its purpose is simple: to restrain any crew member who loses psychological control before they endanger the mission, or worse, the entire crew. Imagine it. You're orbiting 250 miles above the Earth. There's no escape, no help coming. And one of your fellow astronauts begins to act irrationally, agitated, unstable, possibly violent. There's no security guard, no emergency room, only a set of instructions and a roll of tape. According to NASA, the first step is to physically restrain the affected astronaut using heavy-duty tape, hands, feet, and body, securing them to the spacecraft wall. It may sound primitive, but in zero gravity, tape is the most reliable tool for survival. The next step: A sedative kept aboard every mission, specially designed to calm the brain, suppress violent behavior, and stabilize the individual until ground control takes over. So far, NASA claims this procedure has never needed to be used in full, but the fact that it exists means they've considered the worst, and perhaps they've seen signs. You see, space isn't just physically hostile, it's psychologically foreign. No horizon, no air, no weather, no rhythm, just isolation, pressure, stillness. Even the strongest minds can fracture when confronted with the void. This raises a deeper question. If highly trained astronauts can't always handle prolonged missions in space, what does that say about our future plans to colonize the moon, to travel to Mars, to live among the stars? Are we building rockets faster than we're building inner strength? Because technology may take us to other worlds, but only the human mind can decide if we're truly ready to live there. We often imagine astronauts as the pinnacle of human resilience, trained, disciplined, fearless. But what if even they can break? In the silence of space, where Earth is just a blue marble in the distance, the human mind can unravel. NASA knows this. That's why, buried deep in their internal procedures, is a chilling protocol few have ever heard of. The astronaut madness procedure. It's not a myth, it's real, and its purpose is simple: to restrain any crew member who loses psychological control before they endanger the mission, or worse, the entire crew. Imagine it. You're orbiting 250 miles above the Earth. There's no escape, no help coming, and one of your fellow astronauts begins to act irrationally, agitated, unstable, possibly violent. There's no security guard, no emergency room, only a set of instructions and a roll of tape. According to NASA, the first step is to physically restrain the affected astronaut using heavy-duty tape, hands, feet, and body, securing them to the spacecraft wall. It may sound primitive, but in zero gravity, tape is the most reliable tool for survival. The next step: a sedative kept aboard every mission, specially designed to calm the brain, suppress violent behavior, and stabilize the individual until ground control takes over. So far, NASA claims this procedure has never needed to be used in full, but the fact that it exists means they've considered the worst, and perhaps they've seen signs. You see, space isn't just physically hostile, it's psychologically foreign. No horizon, no air, no weather, no rhythm, just isolation, pressure, stillness. Even the strongest minds can fracture when confronted with the void. This raises a deeper question. If highly trained astronauts can't always handle prolonged missions in space, what does that say about our future plans to colonize the moon, to travel to Mars, to live among the stars? Are we building rockets faster than we're building inner strength? Because technology may take us to other worlds, but only the human mind can decide if we're truly ready to live there. It was the most iconic moment in modern history. July 20th, 1969. Millions watched as Neil Armstrong took his first step onto the moon, a giant leap for mankind. Or was it? In the decades since, a shadow has followed the moon landing, a persistent theory that what we saw wasn't the whole truth. Some believe it was faked entirely, a studio production, a brilliant piece of Cold War propaganda to beat the Soviets. But others offer a far more disturbing version. What if NASA really did land on the moon, and what they found there was too dangerous to reveal? According to this theory, when Apollo astronauts touched down, they weren't alone. They were watched, confronted, by beings that didn't want humans there, hostile extraterrestrials already occupying the moon, and their message was clear: leave and never return. After Apollo 17 in 1972, NASA mysteriously ended all manned missions to the moon. They blamed budget cuts, but many believe it was fear of provoking something far older, far more advanced, and far less tolerant of human curiosity. But here's where the story takes a darker twist. If astronauts did encounter alien life, NASA couldn't risk letting the public know. So while some of the mission footage was real, other parts were carefully staged, shot on Earth, to control the narrative, to give humanity a version of the truth we could handle. Photos from the moon show strange, angular shadows, structures that don't match natural formations. Some even claim to see geometric domes and artificial towers in NASA's own images. Are these optical illusions, or glimpses of a reality we were never meant to see? NASA, of course, denies it all. No aliens, no deception, just dust and rock. But the silence that followed the Apollo missions, the decades of absence, have only deepened the mystery. Why did we stop going? Why hasn't anyone returned? If the moon is just a lifeless satellite, why does it feel like we're being kept away? Maybe the truth isn't that we never went, but that once we arrived, we were told to leave. What if someone tried to turn a planet into a star? It sounds like science fiction, but buried in the shadows of conspiracy forums and declassified files lies a theory so bold, it almost dares you to believe it. They call it the Lucifer Project. According to believers, NASA, along with military partners, once considered a plan to ignite Jupiter or Saturn using nuclear detonation. The goal: to create a second sun in our solar system. It began in 2003, when NASA deliberately crashed the Galileo probe into Jupiter. The official reason: to avoid contaminating Jupiter's moon, Europa, with Earth bacteria. But theorists claim the probe carried plutonium, and its true mission was to trigger a chain reaction, a nuclear spark meant to ignite Jupiter's atmosphere. It didn't work. So in 2017, NASA tried again, this time with the Cassini spacecraft crashing it into Saturn. Again, they cited contamination concerns. But could both have been part of a hidden agenda? If successful, such an act would reshape our solar system. It could create a new star, new heat, new gravitational balance, but also catastrophic consequences. Imagine Earth caught between two suns, our climate, our oceans, our entire existence thrown into chaos. Scientists dismiss it all, of course. They say the energy required to ignite a gas giant is beyond any technology we possess. But others are not so sure. They believe black-budget programs and alien technology have already taken us far beyond what the public knows. If true, the Lucifer Project may not be just a failed experiment. It may be a countdown, waiting for someone bold enough to try again. When you hear names like Lockheed Martin or Northrop Grumman, you probably think of jets, weapons, defense. But what if these corporations were part of something much bigger? A shadow network operating beyond Earth, the Interplanetary Corporate Conglomerate, or ICC. According to insiders, this group doesn't just build weapons. It trades with alien civilizations, advanced processors, rare earth metals, artificial intelligence, things that on Earth are considered high-tech, but in interstellar markets are mere commodities. The ICC, they say, runs a massive base beneath the surface of Mars, a secret industrial colony stretching hundreds of miles. And here's the most disturbing part. Many of the workers there didn't volunteer. Reports speak of forced labor, abducted individuals, even children born into slavery, never knowing Earth. A closed system, ruled by an elite few, protected by secrecy, and buried under decades of denial. In 2015, a meeting supposedly held by the Interplanetary Association mentioned removing a dictator on Mars. It was dismissed, laughed off, but it aligned perfectly with earlier leaks about a tyrannical regime controlling the Martian colony. Is it all fiction, a clever fabrication? Or is there a cosmic supply chain operating right above our heads, one we were never meant to see? Because if corporations have already made deals with alien races, then space isn't the final frontier. It's the new stock exchange. In the final years of World War II, the world believed the Nazis were defeated. But some say they simply moved elsewhere, to Antarctica, to underground bunkers, to space. Enter the legend of the Dark Fleet. According to controversial sources, Nazi Germany made contact with an alien species, the Draco, reptilian beings, advanced, ruthless, and ruled by artificial intelligence. With the Draco's help, the Nazis built a secret space armada, massive black ships powered by alien propulsion, far beyond anything the Allies had imagined. These ships, the theory claims, left Earth. They joined the Draco in their galactic campaign, conquering, experimenting, expanding. The fleet still exists, hiding in deep space, operating in the shadows, serving an empire we know nothing about. And Hitler. Some believe he wasn't just defeated, he was removed by the Draco themselves when his usefulness ended. But if the Draco are real, why haven't they invaded? Or maybe they did, not with weapons, but with alliances, with infiltration, with secrets traded in dark rooms and hidden labs. The idea of the Dark Fleet forces us to question everything. What happened after World War II? Why did so many Nazi scientists vanish? And what are we really seeing when strange crafts appear in our skies? Maybe the war never ended. Maybe it just moved beyond Earth. Mars has always whispered ancient secrets, but some believe it once screamed. According to a growing number of independent researchers, there is evidence of nuclear explosions on the surface of the red planet, not caused by nature, not by meteor strikes, but by intelligent beings and their catastrophic war. They point to traces of xenon-129, a rare radioactive isotope found in unusually high concentrations on Mars. On Earth, xenon-129 is a byproduct of nuclear weapons testing. So why is it on Mars? Satellite images show melted rock, scorched plains, and giant craters that look eerily similar to the aftermath of thermonuclear blasts. Some even claim these regions still radiate faint energy signatures, as if the planet never fully recovered. The theory: Mars was once home to two advanced civilizations, Cydonia and Utopia. Their war, they say, was not one of diplomacy or borders. It was total annihilation, a cosmic Armageddon fought with the deadliest technology in the galaxy. And it ended with silence. But the mystery deepens. Why would NASA hide this? Some believe the agency has long known about the war, that they've seen the ruins, that they've collected classified data confirming what the public suspects. Because if Mars once harbored intelligent life and destroyed itself, what does that say about us? Maybe that's the real reason they won't tell us. Because Mars isn't just a dead world. It's a warning. In public, NASA canceled Apollo 18, 19, and 20 due to budget cuts. But according to one man, Apollo 20 flew anyway. And what it found was beyond imagination. William Rutledge, a man claiming to be part of a secret joint U.S.-Soviet mission, says Apollo 20 launched in 1976 and went to the far side of the moon. Its target: a strange, cigar-shaped object seen in photos from the earlier Apollo 15 mission. NASA called it a rock. Rutledge called it a crashed alien spacecraft. According to his account, the Apollo 20 crew entered the derelict vessel and discovered humanoid bodies, eerily preserved, clearly not human, but not entirely alien either. One of them, a female, was dubbed Mona Lisa. She was beautiful, ancient, her face still intact, her expression unreadable. Rutledge later released photos and videos online. Most were dismissed as hoaxes. But some details, oddly, matched early lunar maps and mission coordinates. NASA has never acknowledged Apollo 20. They maintain the mission never existed, that the videos are digitally faked. But if there's nothing to hide, why did so many original Apollo images disappear from archives? And why do some insiders refer to the far side of the moon as off-limits? What if Apollo 20 found something so significant, so dangerous, that NASA decided the truth had to stay buried on the dark side of the moon? In the aftermath of World War II, the world was rebuilding. But some say another alliance was formed, not for earthly matters, but for cosmic ones. They call it the Global Galactic League of Nations. Inspired by the original League of Nations, but hidden from the public, this alliance allegedly includes the most powerful countries on Earth. Its purpose: to coordinate responses to extraterrestrial contact. Whenever a UFO crashed or landed, members would meet behind closed doors, share what they found, divide the research, and above all, keep it quiet. The US, the Soviet Union, China, Germany, and other unnamed nations were reportedly part of this secret coalition. They supposedly recovered crafts, studied alien bodies, and even reverse-engineered technology we now use every day. But behind the cooperation, there were deeper questions. Were we being observed? Was Earth part of some interstellar protocol? And if so, who set the rules? One story claims the Nazis recovered a craft in the Himalayas. Another, that Stalin had his own alien wreckage hidden in Siberia. Yet despite the Cold War's public hostilities, both superpowers continued to share UFO data, a collaboration that defied political logic. But when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, the balance shifted. Did Russia inherit the secrets, or was the League disbanded? Today, information is scarce, but whistleblowers still emerge. Former officials drop cryptic hints, and rumors persist that a secret intergovernmental alliance still exists, operating in the shadows to manage off-world threats. If it's true, then perhaps the question isn't whether we're alone, but how long we've known we were. We've seen them in films, a united front of humanity fighting an alien threat, a planetary coalition protecting Earth. But what if the Earth Alliance isn't just a scriptwriter's fantasy? What if it's real and hiding in plain sight? Conspiracy theorists believe the Earth Alliance is a covert military political force. Its mission: to protect humanity from two enemies, one human, one not. The first, the Illuminati, a shadowy elite manipulating global events from behind the scenes. The second, the Draco, an ancient reptilian species allegedly aligned with Nazi Germany and still seeking influence on Earth. But here's where the story turns surreal. In 2016, the Earth Alliance is said to have backed Donald Trump's rise to power, not for political ideology, but for war. According to insiders, Trump's presidency launched a secret offensive against underground Draco and Illuminati bases, using advanced technology and hidden warships. The climax: a supposed Draco fleet fleeing Earth's orbit, only to be ambushed and destroyed by Earth Alliance vessels. Most people saw news of satellite failures, explosions in space, unusual solar activity. But others say those were cover stories, distractions for battles we were never meant to see. Still, no hard evidence has ever surfaced. No confirmation, no leaks. So we're left with the question: is the Earth Alliance a myth created to offer hope in an unstable world? Or is it a real power, guarding humanity from threats we don't even understand, and keeping us safe without us ever knowing? After World War II, Nazi Germany collapsed, but not all of its scientists disappeared. Many were recruited not by justice courts, but by the United States government. Through a secret initiative called Operation Paperclip, over 1,600 German scientists, engineers, and doctors were brought to America. Their crimes were erased, their talents preserved. And among them was Werner von Braun, the mastermind of Hitler's V-2 rocket program. The man later credited as the father of the Saturn V, which took humans to the moon. He went from working for a dictator to becoming a national hero. But at what cost? Many of these scientists were accused of war crimes, overseeing horrific experiments, working with forced labor, and pushing forward technologies built on suffering. Their knowledge was invaluable, but their pasts undeniable. NASA flourished. So did American dominance in space. But in the shadows, questions lingered. Can progress be built on moral compromise? Does a rocket's success justify the hand that designed it? And if our greatest scientific triumphs are rooted in darkness, how bright is the future they lead us toward? Before humans launched a single satellite, something was already up there. Stories of the Black Knight satellite date back over a century. A mysterious object seen orbiting Earth long before Sputnik, long before space stations. In 1899, Nikola Tesla claimed to receive unexplained signals from space. He believed they were intelligent. By the 1950s, both American and Soviet radar picked up unidentified polar orbiting objects, something no nation could yet achieve. Then in 1998, astronauts aboard the Space Shuttle Endeavour photographed a strange, dark object floating silently above Earth. NASA called it space debris, a piece of thermal insulation. But the image didn't look like insulation. It looked constructed, angular, intentional, alien. Believers say the Black Knight is not from Earth, that it's a 13,000-year-old probe placed in orbit to monitor humanity. A silent guardian, or a silent warden. Some say it broadcasts data back to its creators. Others think it's waiting for us to reach a certain level before it activates. NASA has consistently denied its existence. But the photos persist, the sightings continue, and the question remains: if something has been watching us for 13,000 years, who sent it? And what happens when it decides we're ready? We think of Mars as empty, silent, red, lifeless. But what if it's not? What if there are cities beneath the surface and soldiers living among them right now? That's the story of the Mars Defense Force. According to multiple alleged insiders, the MDF is a multinational military force created to protect 5 underground colonies on Mars. Not science stations, but entire ecosystems, with trees, lakes, animals, and people. Cities divided by class and power, where elites govern and workers serve. One man claimed to have served 17 years on Mars. He described encounters with 2 major threats. First, an ancient native Martian race, resentful of human presence. Second, other alien species with unclear intentions toward both Mars and Earth. But here's where it gets stranger. After 20 years of service, he said soldiers undergo time reversal. Their bodies rejuvenated, memories wiped, then sent back to Earth as if nothing ever happened. Time travel. It sounds impossible. But if such a program exists, then we must ask, why aren't we using this technology here? Why only on Mars? And who decides who remembers and who forgets? Maybe the greatest secret isn't that we've colonized Mars. Maybe it's that we've already fought wars there, and no one remembers them. We're told Mars is still the next step, still a dream, still out of reach. But some say we got there a long time ago. The Red Space Project is the name given to a rumored ultra-secret program that allegedly sent humans to Mars in the 1970s and 1980s. According to this theory, while the public watched Apollo missions wind down, NASA was quietly working with the U.S. military on off-world operations. Facilities in Nevada and Utah simulated Martian environments, not just for testing, but for launching. Whistleblowers like Randy Kramer, a former Marine, claimed he spent nearly 20 years on Mars, defending underground bases from alien threats. His story was dismissed, yet oddly consistent with earlier leaks. Some say strange photos from Mars showing geometric shapes, artificial-looking structures, are leftovers from these early missions. NASA denies it all. They say the cost, technology, and secrecy required would be impossible. But during the Cold War, impossible didn't mean unthinkable. If the Red Space Project is real, then everything we believe about Mars as uncharted territory is a lie. We didn't dream of going there. We already did, and we left footprints in the dust long before we were told we could. Since 1990, the Hubble Space Telescope has captured the imagination of the world. Its images reshaped our understanding of galaxies, black holes, and cosmic beauty. But some of those images raise more questions than answers. Online forums have long circulated Hubble photographs showing straight lines, geometric shadows, and unnatural patterns. Not stars, not gas, but what look like structures, massive ones like cities or space stations. NASA insists these are nothing more than optical illusions, cosmic rays, sensor glitches, or debris trails. But why do some of these images disappear from public archives? Why are explanations vague or missing entirely? Some theorists suggest we've already photographed Dyson spheres, megastructures, or alien habitats. But the public isn't ready for the truth. They point to moments when data was deleted, images blurred, or files marked classified. If true, it begs a terrifying question. Are we seeing signs of life far beyond Earth, and simply being told to look away? Because if Hubble has captured alien cities, then the universe isn't empty, it's inhabited. And we're not just observers, we're being observed back. In space, no one can hear you scream. But what if they can? Since the earliest missions, astronauts have reported something that defies logic: sound in the vacuum of space. In 1969, during Apollo 10's orbit around the Moon, crew members heard a strange transmission. Ethereal, melodic, almost like music. They called it space music. It wasn't radio interference. And it wasn't Earth. NASA kept the recording classified for decades. But Apollo 10 wasn't alone. Cosmonauts on Soviet missions reported knocking sounds, as if someone was tapping from the outside. Chinese astronauts described echoes and whispers with no clear source. NASA explained it away: thermal expansion, equipment noise, psychological stress. But if it were just the mind, why did multiple astronauts describe the same phenomena? Why were some sounds recorded? And why did no one offer a clear answer? Some believe the sounds are signals, attempts at communication from another intelligence. Not noise, but language. We just don't understand it yet. Or perhaps we were never meant to. Because in the silence of the cosmos, even a whisper can feel like a warning. In the remote wilderness of Alaska, a forest of antennas reaches into the sky. Its name, HAARP, the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. Its purpose, officially to study the ionosphere. But some say HAARP is not a research project. It's a weapon, a tool to manipulate weather, trigger earthquakes, and unleash climate chaos, all under the illusion of natural disaster. These theorists believe HAARP can send high-powered radio waves to agitate Earth's upper atmosphere, causing chain reactions that alter weather patterns below. Hurricanes, droughts, tsunamis. Even the devastating 2011 tsunami in Japan has been linked to HAARP by those who believe the technology has gone rogue. NASA's name often comes up not as an operator, but as a partner, using the data for classified projects. Mainstream scientists scoff. They argue the energy HAARP produces is too small to affect global systems. But critics say it's not about scale, it's about precision. A scalpel, not a hammer. And if true, it means nature is no longer entirely natural. It means we've found a way to weaponize the sky. And the next great war may not begin with a missile, but with a cloud. In 1984, aboard the Soviet space station Salyut 7, something impossible happened. The crew reported seeing a bright orange light outside the station. When they looked, they didn't see a solar flare. They saw angels. 7 of them, enormous, glowing humanoid figures with wings stretching for meters floating peacefully in space. The cosmonauts were stunned. They reported the sighting to ground control. No one believed them. Weeks later, when a new crew arrived, they saw the same beings. The reports matched. The descriptions were consistent. And then silence. NASA never publicly addressed the incident. But insiders claim the agency had full access to the reports and chose to bury them. Skeptics say it was a shared hallucination, stress, isolation, light distortions. But how do multiple crews weeks apart see the same thing? Were they extraterrestrial, interdimensional, or something else entirely? Guardians? Some believe the beings were watching, smiling, communicating something humanity wasn't ready to hear, and maybe still is. Because space isn't just a vacuum, it's a stage. And maybe we've been watched all along. We've reached the end of today's journey. But what if it's only the beginning? From secret space fleets and Martian wars, to ancient satellites, whispered sounds, and glowing angels beyond the glass of a space station window. One truth emerges again and again. The universe is not quiet, it's just selective. It hides its secrets in static, in silence, in shadows, and maybe, just maybe, NASA wasn't built to uncover these truths, but to contain them. Because some knowledge changes us. Some truths demand a new kind of courage, not the courage to launch a rocket, but to admit that we might not be alone, that we were never alone. So the real question is, why is NASA hiding these secrets? It's, what would we do if they finally told us the truth? Would we be ready? Or would we choose denial because reality is too big to fit in the world we've built? Perhaps the most terrifying secrets are the ones that echo back in our own silence.